Hi there, and welcome to Let's Slow Down, a podcast for all of you who feel tired and stressed from this overwhelming world. Here we'll have fun, inspiring conversations about living life on our own terms and explore ways to ease the pace of our modern world, because life really is good when you're relaxed enough to be present for it. I'm your host, Anne-Marie Stolting, and I welcome you to this space where I hope to inspire you to slow down, because life is too short to let it go by in a blur. So take a deep breath, relax, and enjoy the show. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Let's Slow Down podcast. Today's guest is Amy Kemp. Amy Kemp is wife and mother of three and the owner and CEO of Amy Kemp Inc. In her work within this growing company, Amy helps leaders and business professionals understand how deeply thought habits impact every part of their work and lives. As a certified habit finder coach, Amy has led over 300 female business leaders through a program called Encounter, designed to replace unhealthy thought habits with healthier ones. In addition, Amy teaches online courses that are designed to challenge and expand her clients' understanding of themselves. Some of the most popular topics in her library of offerings are money is a mirror and a boundary is a wall. Love those. Finally, with the launch of her first book, I See You, a guide for women to make more, have more, and be more without more work, Amy offers an opportunity for everyone to learn and engage with her and the principles that guide her coaching. Forbes magazine named I See You as one of the 5 books to help you become a better leader in 2024. Welcome to Let's Slow Down, Amy.
Thank you so much. I always love to hear when you hear about yourself in third person. It's so fun. She
You
sounds
have an
really
impressive
cool.
bio. She does sound cool.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
So excited to have you on and to talk to you about all these amazing things that you've been accomplishing in your life and your fabulous book. You are the first habit finder coach that I've met. So this is exciting and a little bit new today. I really can't wait to hear about all that you do. And I'd love to start, as I always do, by hearing a little bit about your background and what led you to where you are today.
Of course. As we were talking about before, my very first professional iteration was as a high school English teacher. I thought that I wanted to teach college, be a professor and teach English there, but really found in a Marxist literary theory class, decided that I wasn't sure I wanted to spend my life reading about that. And so
Fair enough.
started teaching high school English, which I did for about 5 years. On this side, I started a small direct sales business, which I thought was just something I would do to kind of have fun and earn some extra income. And that business grew into something that was my full-time work for over 20 years, leading a nationwide organization of over 1,000 people and the top sales team in the country. So I sort of went from this very traditional world of education into this business world by accident. But I'm so grateful for what I learned through those decades of developing women and really learning how to be a business owner. What's really interesting is that I do a lot of things that you learn about in business school, but I don't know what they're called. And sometimes people will use terms and I'm like, oh, yeah, I do that. I just didn't know it was called that.
Yeah. There's a lot of fancy jargon, and you know what?
Totally.
It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
It's walking the walk that means
Of
something.
course. About 7 years ago, I sort of accidentally started another company. I thought it was something I would do on the side. And I really was feeling a strong urge to work with women outside the context of my other business. And it wasn't my own urge. It was like everywhere I went, I was having the same conversations with women who were moms and business people or professional women or women who worked outside of the home. And they were struggling with a lot of the same issues. And I kept having the same conversation and feeling this like, they're so isolated and they need to know each other. If I could just pull them together, there would be some kind of magical connection that could happen that would serve everyone. So I was speaking at an event in Salt Lake City. I flew out there. I had worked with a habit finder coach about 3 years before this trip out to Salt Lake. And he and I had stayed in touch. We're still friends. And I said, I'm going to be in town, And so he picked me up at the airport. We met for dinner. And I was telling him about this just urge to like work with these women. And he said, Well, I really think you need to take action on it. I mean, I really just think you need to do something, which just felt ridiculous. I had 3 really busy kids, a growing, thriving business already. It just felt ridiculous. And yet it felt so right. And he said, on Monday, we're starting training for habit finder coaches. So that was the first moment I ever considered being a habit finder coach ever. Like, it wasn't like something I'd been nursing for years. I had the urge to work with the women. Had no connection to the tool until he said it, and then all of a sudden I was like, "Oh, yes, that's it." Because that tool, what I worked with this coach on, my habits of thinking, was the thing that grew my business and changed my life more than any other personal and professional development I had done. And so all of a sudden, I went home, talked it over with my husband, Ryan, who said, every time we've ever invested in you, it's been worth it, which thank you for really confident men who let you
Yeah.
be great,
So
right?
supportive.
So grateful for that. Started the training on Monday and then started my first groups like 6 weeks later. So again, when I say, I mean, there was no hint of a long-term strategic plan and definitely no hint at what the business has now become. But what happened was just that it was like beyond me. It kind of just like grew. And the women that I was working with were having such significant life change. And there was such momentum, and they were sharing me that now that's about 98% of my time. I still have the other business, but my assistant really runs it. So this is the work in which I am absolutely thriving. It's this cross section of women who have very busy lives and habits of thinking and how those two things are showing up in the world and impacting us. So super cool.
It really is. And I can see,
Mhm.
we're together on a Zoom call, so a lot of people are listening on the audio, but I can see how passionate you are
Mm,
about this and how it lights you up and how excited you are. And I feel like that is really the marker of finding your calling, finding your
yeah,
purpose, something that fuels you and excites you, that motivates you to want to come to work every day and impact the lives of other people. So it's incredible that you found it really seemingly almost by accident, which is
totally.
wild.
Totally. So actually, let me tell you too, because I didn't really answer the question about the habit finder piece too. So the tool that I use has an assessment. It's called the habit finder. And then there's a curriculum. So as a teacher, I love working people through a curriculum. And I actually run my business like school. I do fall and spring semesters, which is funny because just my rhythm always has been that. It just
Yes, me
feels good in
too.
my body. And it works well with my family too. So the curriculum that I work through in my small groups is the same I use with one-on-one clients. It's obviously sort of the difference between like having a one-on-one tutor and being in a class or a small class of people where you're working through something. So the tool is a tool that measures, if you can imagine like the grooves in your brain, it measures the risk of your brain falling into certain habits of thinking. And it's happening all subconsciously, so we're not aware of it, but it's impacting every part of every day. So that's the actual work, is using this tool, which you can take for free on my website and get your results right away and kind of get a taste of it. And then the curriculum is what I use to actually replace some of those unhealthy habits of thinking with more healthy ones. So cool.
I know that's amazing. And I know I've read that there are really the majority of our thoughts are subconscious. We're not even aware of them,
Vast.
right?
Yeah, it's the vast. I think it's like 83% of your thoughts are subconscious every day. So yeah, we're not even aware. And sometimes when you take the habit finder, people even feel a little irritated. I know I did. I just felt like, well, how did you really know that from that? But once I saw it, it was one of those things where once I saw it, I kept seeing it everywhere, everywhere. Oh, there it is again, and there it is again, and there it is again, and there it is again. So, yeah.
So these thought habits,
Mhm.
really, why don't you define for us what a thought habit is?
Sure. So, a habit of thinking is something we've practiced in our brain. We're hardwired for survival. Our human bodies are. And so, as much as possible, our body stores things subconsciously so that we don't take energy to think them. But let me give you a couple examples of habits of thinking that might show up for people. I'll give you one that was one that I learned the first time when I was working with my own habit finder coach. And that was a tendency to take on or take responsibility for the people I was leading, not just in a way where I cared, but in a way where I was literally feeling responsible for their experience in life to an extent that I didn't really want to lead any more people because it was so exhausting to carry the weight of the success and failure of people and to ride the roller coaster of their highs and lows. And so what we worked on was, how do you show up for people? My habit of thinking was that I needed to fix them, right? I needed to fix their problems and manage their situation so they were happy. So, what I learned through that experience was that it was okay for them to have their own experience. And I could show up and listen. And literally, I'll tell you one of my favorite little tools that I still use, which is so funny. But I imagine when I'm heading into a tough conversation with a client, even now, I have this little one person submarine in my head and I climb in and I like have it all decorated the way I like it. And I seal the lid and I go down into the murky water that they're in and I'm with them fully, but I don't need to take on their stuff. I can just be present with their stuff and listen. And then after the conversation, I can go up out of the water, unseal my tank, and leave that behind. It's not mine to carry, but my role is to hold space for them and to be present with them, not to fix their problems. And that was a huge lesson that allowed me to then lead with so much more effectiveness because I wasn't attached to their outcomes. And so I could really lead more people and I wasn't so drained all the time. This is very significant.
That's
Mhm.
amazing. I feel like we could apply that to a lot of areas of our
Oh,
life.
children are the worst, right?
Yeah.
Because we want to take on their stuff even more because we love them so intensely. And so we want to like manage their lived experience instead of just letting them have it and letting them
Yeah.
learn from it. Mhm.
Yeah. It's great. That's a great image to have. I will definitely be taking a page out of that in the future. Because I would imagine that you have a big heart, you care, you
Mhm.
want obviously the best for everybody that you're working with and someone that's trusting you to guide them through this process. It must be hard to detach at the end of the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah. And it's a boundary, right? It's a boundary of what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours, to know that it's not my job to take it on and to pull what's yours into mine. My job is to just show up fully present for you and to listen and let you kind of figure out your own journey through it. So, yes.
Speaking of boundaries, I was going to
Mm.
ask you this later, but I think it just came up. I have done a lot of boundary work myself and we've talked about it, had podcast episodes about it. Boundaries are really important. I feel like boundaries are part of adulting, part of growing up, having to learn. I mean, hopefully we can teach our children as well, but as adults, learning how to set them and not only having boundaries in our lives, but honoring them and actually sticking to them. So, can you speak to us a little bit about that?
Mm,
It's hard.
oh my gosh. Boundary setting is a practice, it's not a one time decision. It is a daily walk. And I mean, I can go so many different ways. I think what I'd love to share with your audience in particular is this one part of my book where I talk about boundaries, not just with people, but also having healthy boundaries with our goals, with our ambition. Because, so I'll kind of give you the framework because I think it's a really important one, particularly for people who have a very full life. They have work that they're passionate about and they have deep ambition, right? I am a deeply ambitious woman. I always will be. I always have been. I like to create stuff and grow stuff and impact people. And so I always will have that as a part of my life. But I have this other part of my life where I have these three kids, this husband, and this community that I'm a part of, my faith, my whole, like all this other stuff, right? Well, I see women a lot of times setting goals, let's say for their business or their career, without taking into account the fullness of their life. So, even to have a healthy relationship with our goals, we've got to have boundaries with it. So, I'll give you an example. Maybe your goal is to increase your income by $10,000 this year while taking Fridays off so you can take your mom to her doctor appointments. Maybe your goal is to, my overarching goal is to work like a teacher where I work from 8 to 3, 4. I have weekends off, evenings off, and then I have the breaks off that my kids have off. Summers, I still work, but more part time ish. And so that's how I want to work like a teacher, boundaried, right? But also get paid like a CEO. But if I only had the goal of getting paid like a CEO without the boundary, then I have no framework through which I can make decisions that takes into account these other priorities that I have chosen in my life. I also know that both are possible when I have the boundary, but that they get tested every day. So I tell the story of in the book about this woman I talked to. Oh gosh, was she my perfect client? Like all the work I do, I was just like, oh, you're my people. She was just it. If you could put my ideal client in a box on a shelf, it would be her. And we had this beautiful conversation about the work I do. And she was so excited about getting started. And then we got to the end of the conversation and she said, okay, so the only thing is we'd have to do our calls like at 6 because I don't get home till then and I can't do it during the day at work. And I was like, oh gosh.
The balloon, right?
Uh, so I've learned that I have to give myself a sleep. So I just said, I need to think about it. Can I call you back tomorrow and, give you but I need to think about it because I don't work evenings. And I slept on it and I just knew like if I said yes, I could not lead her through what she needed to learn with any kind of integrity. I could not have integrity with the rest of my clients, right? I just knew it was a no. And so I had to deliver that message and say, I think you're amazing. Is there any way you could do it over lunch? Or, like I tried everything I could, but it was
Sure.
just a no. And so I left all of that money on the table, plus the opportunity to serve this really amazing person because it didn't fit within that framework, within the boundary of my taming my ambition, or at least, taking into account my other choices. So again, it's just this constant push and pull of it being pushed on. That's what boundaries are there for. So
And having that framework, although it's not easy, does help bring clarity and help make these decisions that line up much better with how authentically want to be living and running your business. And so they're so helpful.
I know. And again, what it does also though is causes me to be really clear about the things. If that's my goal, right? To be work like a teacher, get paid like a CEO, I can very quickly look at things that are coming in and say that doesn't align or it's not going to allow me to do that or it's an easy filter through which I can make decisions about my business, right? And I've gotten so creative. People will say like, "How did you ever seem to do that?" I'm like, "Well, because it was the only option." Like it's a forced creativity that causes you to come up with solutions to things that you would never come up with because you have the context of that boundary. And again, I think it's important. I don't feel resentful. I chose to have the children. Right? Like I chose
Yes.
I want to be part of the things they're doing right now. It's not like I don't want to. I mean, there were times when they were babies where I really was happy to leave them and go to work. I'm not gonna lie. But like right now, I love the stuff they're doing. I want to be at my son's academic banquet on Wednesday, and I want to be at the scrimmage on Thursday that they're having for the basketball team. I want that. So it's again looking at the wholeness of your life and not just one or the other when you're setting your goals.
Yeah. And it does help take into account, as you were talking, I'm thinking of all these things, especially for a lot of parents that are listening, all of these things that come into play. And yes, we did choose them and we welcome them, but they have to be accounted for. Just all of the things that come with kids, yes, they're extracurriculars and all of that, but the doctor's appointments and
Oh,
just feeding them. I mean, they just don't stop eating. Just that alone.
mm,
All of these things that we have to account for that take our time and our energy, nanning. And, sometimes I think that I have all this time. I don't have maybe a set appointment for a day, but there are so many other things that take up time that we could all easily fill our days with all this other stuff. So,
100%.
I,
And
yeah,
this is so okay. So in chapter 9 of my book, I talk a lot about women and unpaid labor. And again, the unpaid labor isn't just cooking, cleaning, laundry. It's making appointments. It's who's getting their hair cut, who's cleaning out the summer clothes and the winter clothes and realizing that none of the shorts fit anymore and the tennis shoes have holes in them and, who is planning the birthday celebrations, I mean, my son's graduating from high school in a couple of weeks. My husband has no idea what's happening with the party. Now, again, he'll help if I ask, but like he would just now be thinking like, "Oh, maybe we should have a party." And the day before, he'll be like, "Hey, did we like order food for this?" Or, I mean, it's just like so crazy how much unpaid labor women do. In fact, there's a whole survey in the book where you can actually figure out how much unpaid labor you do on average in a week. And most people are just shocked. Now, there is a little bit where it's like, okay, we've got to redistribute some of that if both people are working full time. We also have to normalize bringing people in and paying them to help with some of the unpaid labor. But there are some of those things that I want to do. There are some things that I love to do, right? Like I want to plan the graduation party and I want to do some of that stuff. And so it's also the stuff that is the fabric, like it holds the fabric of our communities and families together, a lot of that caretaking unpaid labor. So I'm not being critical or undervaluing it. I'm just saying you don't get paid money in exchange for it in most cases, but you're doing it, right?
you're doing
And
it. Yep.
yeah, and I see so many women exhausted and then or here's another great one. A lot of the structures that are in place in our world are in place for a family that has one person at home and one person who leaves the house to work, right? So, for example, all of the like networking events in our area are at 7:30 or 4:30, 7:30 a.m. or 4:30 p.m. All of the like chamber kind of networking events or the, business after hours or golf outings or whatever, right? Well, like, those are the 2 worst times for me. There's no way. I can't do that. Like, that doesn't even that's when everyone's leaving and getting on the bus and doing all that. And then that's right when they're coming home, and that's, like, complete chaos. There's so much happening. But then women are beating themselves up because they're not moving forward as fast in their careers, or they're not selling as many widgets as their peer who has a full-time stay-at-home spouse, or they're not able to finish the advanced degree like the other people in their office, or they're not right, or they don't even wanna pursue the promotion because they can't even keep up with what they're doing. But what you're not taking into account, and what I don't wanna have happen is that you lose confidence and feel like there's something missing or wrong with you. There is nothing wrong with you. You're just doing 2 full-time jobs, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And so there's nothing wrong with you. It's just that the weight of that unpaid labor can be heavy and there's a lot of it. And so taking that into account, the pace and really bringing that into the fullness of your life and choosing it, embracing it, and then delegating or paying for the things that you really don't want to do or don't need to do also. So,
And I think that speaks to, you know, the slowing down piece as well. I know for me, I hit that point where I was like, wait a minute, like things are going way too fast. There's too much going on. It is overwhelming. It's creating burnout. I'm not able to be present for some of those moments, especially at home that I want to be because I'm getting distracted and pulled in so many directions. So
yeah,
for me, setting boundaries was a huge part of it and thinking differently, but also just taking that pause and slowing down to see and really take a good look. Do I need to be doing all of these things?
yeah,
What can I outsource? What can I let go of? What can I
yes.
simplify?
I think the question I'll always ask that's really similar or a similar vein is what am I trying to create? Because what you're trying to create is a whole life, right? Part of that is a business or a career. Part of that is a family. Part of that is a community, like all of it, right? But it's what's the wholeness of what I'm trying to create and where is my investment now? Oh, I have just a really quick story that just happened that was such a good reminder. My son had back surgery about a month ago, and anyhow, it was unexpected, and then a couple weeks later, he ended up back in the hospital with a staph infection from this surgery. It was, like,
No.
not what we wanted to have happen, but it did, and what are you gonna do? So of course, my whole world was upended. Nothing could have kept me from being with him in the hospital. So I was with him in the hospital for 5 days, and about the 5th day when he was feeling better and I knew things were gonna be okay, I started to feel frustrated that, like, my work had just been tossed, I had to reschedule everything and it was derailing me, and I had all of this noise in my head. And so in my kind of quiet time in the morning, I just had this impression that was so strong, and it was just get higher, like, get above it. And so I was like, "Okay." So I got myself above the situation. It's like, what am I trying to create? Trying to create a really healthy whole family and life. Well, in that case, when someone's sick, you just drop everything and care for them, right? So actually, nothing was derailed. I actually was just as much in the creative process and being in the hospital with him than I would have been had I been here in my office working. I just was, like, playing into this narrative that it wasn't as productive or what, but, like,
Mhm.
that's just a bunch of BS, honestly, right? Like, what I'm trying to create is the fullness and the wholeness of all of that. And so instantly, I just felt differently about it. I had no resistance, and guess what? All the work gets done anyhow, it's fine. Life
Yep.
goes on, people understand. But it was like this nagging voice of like, "You're derailed, it got you always," and then I'm like, "Hold up. That's not even
Yep.
true. I am creating right now in the act of sitting here with this kid who I love to pieces. That is creation. That is a huge part of creation. And I'm choosing it and going to be present in it fully and not resist it." So,
I
anyhow,
love that.
it's just a really example of like the wholeness and what are you trying to
Yes.
create?
Yep. That big picture. And you were on course 100%.
Yeah.
It's these little thoughts in the back of our head that sometimes make us think otherwise, but you were 100% going in the direction that you needed to be going.
Absolutely.
So, and it speaks to the power of these thoughts because they
Yeah.
are, oh my gosh, they're transformative in good ways and
Yeah.
in bad ways. And that moment only took a second, probably, where you had that realization.
Yeah.
So it's powerful how we can change quickly. We can change direction so quickly or realize, oh, I'm actually fine exactly where I need to be.
Mhm.
And I want to ask you something that you had
Yeah.
just mentioned. You talked about your quiet time in the morning, and I love
Mhm.
to talk about morning routine. And I think, I mean, I'm an introvert. I need that quiet time every single day just to feel like me. So, what is you mentioned that you have that in the morning. What does your morning routine look like?
Mhm. Well, first, I think I've grown a ton where I went through some seasons where I felt like I had to do that because people said you should. And it just felt like every successful person I knew was like, well, you started today with this.
Yeah.
And so
Then
it
it
felt
feels
like,
like another chore, and it's not
yes,
supposed to be a chore. Yeah.
yeah, I have come to relish it. Like, It is my favorite part of the day because it is the time in which I receive. And I use kind of the framework of the miracle morning. If you are
Yep.
not familiar
I
with
actually did a
this.
whole episode about it not
Oh,
too long ago.
cool. So
Yeah.
you can go back and listen,
Yeah.
but there are just some practices of affirmations and journaling and reading 10 pages a day and really I think of it sort of like I'm taking care of my brain. I have a really busy, active brain that requires a higher level of care than some people. And so if I don't really take that time, I'll lean anxious, I'll lean overworking, I'll lean overthinking. And so that time really clarifies and allows me to receive. It's kind of funny while I'm doing it too. I have these little, if you can't see, it's this little scratch piece of paper, but I always keep one by me because I receive such inspired ideas in that time that I want to write them down and not miss them. So if someone's name pops in my head, if I remember that I need to pick up the dry cleaning, if I'm even looking at this, oh, I need to stop by the bank to fill out this one little form. Like I just put it down on that paper so I don't forget. But sometimes it's also an inspired, like I have a name on here that I was like, oh, I should reach out to her. I don't know why, but something is telling me to. So it's where I open myself up and clear out blockage so I can receive and really kind of go through my day in more of an energy of allowing than of like plowing through and creating and attacking, but more of just a receiving and then allowing that to work through me and my unique gifts and like kind of go out into the world to serve the people that I'm here to serve. So,
Such a gentle way to start your
mm,
day with intention.
I know. I used to be a super like overachiever, really controlled, like wanting to, and
Yeah.
it got to a place where there was like the law of diminishing returns, where working harder was starting to be detrimental to me and the people that I was leading, and they really didn't need that from me, and this new way of living and this new way of approaching it is much more of, like, an exploration, an adventure. It's kind of like the start of this business. I was like, "Alright, here we go." But it's led to a higher level of abundance also, and a more peaceful life experience, a deeper impact too, because I think people can feel it and it's rare and they are curious about it. Like, what is that? I want that. What is that?
I was just gonna say curiosity is the word that came to mind
Mhm.
as you were
Yeah.
describing that for sure.
Mhm.
And I think that you opened yourself up to, I mean, when you were describing your history, how you really did just accidentally, but not accidentally, stumble into
Absolutely.
these different opportunities. And I believe that came from a place of you being open and
Mm.
able to ease into that and allow it in. And if you were super rigid and been thinking that's not part of my plan, that wasn't on the 10-year,
Oh my
list,
gosh. Yes.
you
And
may
there
have
were
shut the
times where
door.
I wished it hadn't been, I'll be honest. Like the transition was really difficult. And so there were times where I was like, really? Really? We have to change everything? Like, where it felt a little messy, but it was necessary. Definitely.
Sure. And it seems like it's definitely served you well and
Yeah.
landed you where you're supposed to be right now.
Mhm. Yeah.
Definitely.
And I think
Uh,
too, part of that frantic part of my life was like I had little kids. I mean, there was just a reality to just a frenzy of diapers and babies and doctor's appointments, and
yeah,
there was just a frenzy of that where now I feel like parenting kids who are teenagers and then now my daughter's 20, but there's a little more freedom for women after that frenzy. So if you're in the frenzy, just know, like,
it's a
yeah, it's
season.
yeah, it is. And then there's a new season that has its own challenges and things, but and its own busy, but it's different where yeah.
For
I
sure.
prefer this. I really love these older kids.
My youngest is just 10, and I'm really starting to enjoy this next season as well. It's
Yeah,
very different from those toddler years and the baby
very.
years. And
Yeah.
it is, that just speaks to how important it is for us to acknowledge where we are in life. I mean, sometimes things aren't the most realistic right now. It doesn't mean that they're never going to be and it's not
Yes.
forever, but okay, maybe for the next year or two, it's not the time.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
you have
and,
to listen
like,
to that.
just as a funny example, though, there was, like, 8 to 10 years where I have no idea what music was popular. I don't know what shows like, I lost all pop culture, right? Well, and then I was in this new season where me and my daughter plays college volleyball, my son's playing college basketball, like, we did a ton of travel sports and things. Well, you have a lot of dead time. So, like, I all of a sudden watched more shows and, like, read more fun books than I have in decades. Now I'm, like, the expert on Netflix because I just had all this I was busy, but in a different way. And so,
Yep.
yeah, it's definitely seasonal and each season has different opportunities for us. But there is a reality to like moving a tiny human from birth to like an independent adult that it is just a very real investment and a really important one too.
Sure. Yeah. Most important
Mhm.
job. Wow. So you describe yourself as a lifelong learner, deep thinker, happy wife, committed mom, strategic business owner. How do you do it all? Like I know boundaries are important. And actually let's really speak to that deep thinker piece, like the busy
Mm.
mind. You said that you have an active brain. I always say I have such a busy mind. That's what I call it. So can you give those people who may also feel that way about themselves, maybe like I don't know, a tip or a hack? Like, what is your number one way to deal with that when you feel like you're really in it, in the thick of it? Your mind's going, 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 and you're trying to get out of it.
Okay, you're gonna giggle when I tell you this, but there is a whole chapter in the book, for real. You're leading me right to my chapters, but one of the most important things for you to do if you have a really busy mind is to have a lot of scheduled guilt-free play in your calendar. So guilt-free play is where you are so present and where you are that you don't even think about your work or anything else. So for example, when I play pickleball, all I can do is play pickleball. And it is so fun. And for 2 hours, my brain gets a break, right? Because just sitting on the couch, like watching TV, that doesn't really, it's not, it's my brain then, like it's too, if I read a fun book,
Yep.
I can definitely take a break, but like just sitting doesn't serve me. I also build in a ton of guilt free play. Like we just went away this weekend. We did my mom, my daughter, my mom's sisters, and then some of their girls. So like a girls trip. And we went to Zion National Park in Utah and we did all these hikes. Like the whole weekend, I did not think about work. I have no idea, right? We did a really fun, oh my gosh, it was so funny. We did a name exchange and each person got another person and you got to buy their phone case that they had to use for the weekend. And it was an absolute riot. My daughter, who's 20, had this like huge fish on her phone, like we had the funniest, it was so great. My mom had this super ugly foot with, like, jeweled toenails, and we just had so much fun, right? But it's like, what are you doing when your brain is resting? And that doesn't mean you're sitting still doing nothing. Like, when I would go visit my husband's grandparents in assisted living, or playing cards, or going out to dinner with friends that there's really lovely conversation. Those types of things must be scheduled into my life all the time, unapologetically. It is the most important investment that I make in my work, in my family. It is the most important part of what I do because my brain is so active and I can get done in 4 hours what most people get done in 8. And so I don't need to work that many hours, but I need to really make sure that my brain is not overthinking, over analyzing, getting anxious. And so the guilt free play is literally the most important thing that I do in terms of creative work and really moving my business forward, which sounds so funny, but it's true. So,
Sounds great. And I would imagine you're back so refreshed
ah,
and just like clear headed and ready to go.
yeah. Mhm. And then inspired. I mean, we did this hike on this trip that was like I still can't believe I did it. If you know that park, it's called Angel's Landing. You can even go to YouTube and watch a little video of it. Had I known what it was, I'm so glad I didn't Google it. I would have never done it. But I have this really adventuresome cousin, and she was like, "You can," do it." And I was like, "Okay." And so we were exposed. I mean, it was thousands of feet down. I'm holding a chain. It is like less than 6 inches. I would have never done it, but I will tell you, I was fully present. And then afterward, we were so pumped about it. I would never do it again, ever, ever, ever. But like, I'm so glad I did. I'm so glad I shared that experience with them. So glad I shared it with my daughter. So glad I did it. But I'm just saying, there's something that I learned there that I'm stewing on that I will use in my work, right? There's something to be learned there about being where your feet are, especially when things are challenging. You can't look beyond the next step when things get really tough. You just hold on to the chain and take the next step, right? And you just keep going until you get to the wider path. And then you can look around and maybe see where you're going in the distance. But there are times in life like that too, right?
Yeah.
So all of it is like inspiring a higher level of work and energy in me. And then I get to show up for my clients and my work with that also. So it's a vital part, and we don't value it enough in our American consumerist
Agreed. Yep.
corporate led culture.
That's an important message. I mean, that's a huge takeaway for today.
Mm.
And I love it. I love it. Love talking to you. As we wind down today, I always like to ask people if you could just let us know what's a way or a couple ways that you're slowing down in your life right now, because you're
Mm.
doing a lot.
I am. I have a huge team of people that's supporting me. So it looks like I'm doing a lot. A lot of it isn't being done by me. But one thing I'm doing right now that I love is that we moved into a new house a couple years ago, and it has a gigantic yard, and it's beautiful. Like the person who lived here before planted all of these plants where they bloom at different times. There's just color everywhere. And it takes a lot of work to, like, keep it up, and there's weeds, and my husband he is shocked at me, but I love it. Like, I can't already I'm, like, looking forward to being done with work today so I can get out there and get my gloves on and get dirty and get my hands in the dirt. There's something really slow about it. There's something that allows me to process. There's something really, like, elemental about having my hands in the dirt that I never even knew I liked until 2 years ago. So I'm
Wow.
so grateful for that. It has been such a cool part of my life in the last couple of years. And I really think a huge part of writing the book was that, because I was out there digging and thinking and working in my head, or it was like letting things kind of simmer while I was working with my hands. So, and it keeps me like grounded. It's been really cool.
I love that. That's beautiful.
Mhm.
So everybody needs to go check out this book, I See You by Amy Kemp. Where can everyone find you?
Yeah, well, I would invite you to 2 places. One, my website, which is amykemp.com. As I mentioned earlier, if you're interested in learning more about your habits of thinking, take the habit finder. You get the results right away. There's a 44-page PDF that kind of breaks down the results of the assessment, and it's fascinating. So that's one place. You can also read, there's a whole section about the book, including a really cool video. It's a YouTube video that I did with 7 women, kind of Oprah style, where we're just sitting in a circle talking about ICU, but it was professionally recorded. It's in my living room. So I just gathered some of the coolest women I know, and they were the first readers of the book. So the conversation is the very first conversation that was ever had about the book, because they had like an advanced reader copy. So that is there. And then also you could follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Amy Kemp Inc. I love social media as a connecting platform, and you can follow along with the work I do there, some of the messaging in the book, and get kind of a vibe for me too. I'd love to have you join me.
Thank you. I'll link everything in the show notes so people can find you. And thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for being such a gracious guide. It's been
Pleasure.
fun.
I hope you've enjoyed our journey together. Please take a moment to rate and review the show. It really helps us grow and reach others looking to slow down too. Wishing you simplicity and ease in your world, and I'll see you back here next week.